Hello, welcome back to Slaying the Craft, the show where we go inside the mind of a thriller writer. I am your host, Sabrina Thatcher. I am an author, podcaster, book coach, and most importantly, a fanatic of the genre. I am so excited to introduce my guests today. They are one of my favorite people, one of my closest writing friends. Karin Nordin is an author, martial artist, cosplayer, legit cosplayer, and self-proclaimed cat whisperer. Their first novel, Where Ravens Roost, right up here, was shortlisted for the 2022 CWA John Creasy New Blood Dagger Award, and their second novel, Last One Alive, also right here, was a 2022 ITW Best Ebook Award nominee. They also have two standalone psychological thrillers, Sweet Little Lies and The Man in Room 7. They have a master's in creative writing from the University of Edinburgh and a master's in Scandinavian literary studies from the University of Amsterdam. Hello. Born in the biggest little city in the world and raised in America's Rust Belt, they now live in the Netherlands. Karin's next book, Home Sweet Home, will be released April 9th of 2026, and their first horror novel, Ravenous, will be released this October under the pen name Dax Dagger. So, welcome, Karin Dax,
Thank
my
you.
friend.
That was the most amazing introduction ever. I was like, wow, that's true. I did do that.
It was easy when I'm like, your first two books were nominated for major industry
Which was
awards.
wild.
Are you kidding?
I didn't even know what those
Wild.
awards were when they were nominated. I was literally at dinner and my phone pinged on Twitter back in the day when that existed. And I was like, why is my phone blowing up? And it was it was the ITWs. And I was like, this is wild. And then a month later at dinner again, phone blowing up. And it was the CWA. And I was like, this is crazy.
I mean, that's insane. And I think it just, especially your first two novels, right? That's so amazing. And we'll just kind of briefly go into it, because for some listeners, they may know about the way that publishing works and there's different forms of publishing, but you're with a digital first publisher right now, which means that your books are coming out in ebook and then later come out in paperback. And the fact that you still had these books and they were nominated for these significant awards, it's just a huge testament to you and your skills and how amazing. I love this book series.
I love it
I'm a big
too.
fan. I can't wait for the next one.
That is the one question I get the most from readers, because I think the readers who have read my first two books, they feel very strongly about the characters that are in them and they really want to see what happens to them. And I have outlines for the next three and a prequel. One day.
Oh my God, I
one
want that
day I hope
so bad. So bad. Need the prequel.
One day.
Just send it to me. I don't care if nobody else sees it. Just send it to me.
I really hope that I get to go back to those characters one day, because I do feel like they deserve an ending better than the one in Last One Alive. So we'll see. Yeah. I hope so.
Yeah, me too. Okay, so tell me about Home Sweet Home. That's coming out on April 9th.
That is my new one.
You have it there with you.
So
Yay!
Excited. So this is I'm going to say it's a psychological suspense thriller. And it is about a woman who, as a teenager, escapes from an alien doomsday cult. And
Ooh!
Yes. And then an alien doomsday cult. Yes. We're going very Jonestown here.
What?
And basically she escapes from the cult as a teenager, and then fast forward about 20 years and it's approaching the date that her cult believed was going to be the end of the world. And she kind of gets sucked back into the cult. She returns to the commune after 2 decades and on this date. And it's a question of, is it real? Is it not real? Can she trust the other people that are there? Who was really behind getting her back to the commune? And it's a bit of a departure for me. I think if you are a fan of my third book, Sweet Little Lies, it's a little bit more like that one when it comes to the way it's told, and the characters I think are more in line with that book. But yeah, it's definitely you have to read all the way up to the last page to find out what is going on.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting. Okay, so note to self, don't read the last page first. Not that I always do that, but there was a time when I was an early reader where I would get so anxious when I was reading a thriller or a suspense that I'd have to look at the end to just like, okay, I just have to know what happens. Better now. But note to self, last page is where the answers are. So don't look.
Don't look. I mean, and I kind of try. It's fun because I wrote this one in a way that there's a lot of back and forth. We actually are very close to the end of the book in the opening pages, and then we jump back about 24 hours, and that's kind of a build up over the course of a single day. And there is a countdown on the book that's supposed to be like a countdown to the, when the aliens arrive, essentially, is what the characters believe, or at least some of the characters believe. And so, but it's fun. And I think it'll be interesting when it comes out to hear what people think about the ending, because I feel like depending on what you think is going on in the book might determine what you think happens at the end of the book.
Ooh, oh, that's really exciting. So tell me a little bit about the inspiration of this story.
So that's kind of twofold. I wanted to write a story that involved, a supposed alien abduction or somebody who believed they had been abducted. I was rewatching the X-Files a couple years ago, and I was just like, man, I love that first episode where
I wonder where you got the idea
I love that first
then.
episode. I think it's the first episode where a young teenager claims to have been abducted by aliens, and they are trying to prove whether it happened or not. And so I had this idea of somebody who, maybe had that in their background. But then I thought to myself, well, what if it hadn't happened yet? What if they believe it will happen? And they're waiting for it. And that's kind of how I came across this idea of, well, there have been groups of people in the past who have believed that there are entities from other galaxies that are going to come and save them for being the chosen people. And I'm like, that is an interesting story. And then, of course, I fell down a rabbit hole of cult TikTok, which is very interesting.
Oh my God. I mean, like you could, so I did research on, I have a cult book idea that eventually I want to write too. Like you could be down in that research and like in those rabbit holes for so long. Have you listened to the podcast A Little Bit Culty?
I have not.
Okay, so it's from the main like whistleblower for Nexium and her husband. They do it together, and so they talk about being in a cult and like the experience and like what
I've heard part of it. I haven't heard the whole thing though.
Yeah. So it's like super good, but obviously like I could talk about cults all day.
Well, and I love reading. I don't know what it says about me, but I love reading books about cults. And I love watching movies about cults. I just think this idea of, people being kind of sucked into something and how easy somebody can be manipulated into, a belief system or like a completely new culture. I find that so fascinating. And so I thought, well, how can I do this and make it feel, honest to what a survivor would go through, but still be about a topic that, is a little bit out there, a little bit wild. Because of course, not everybody's going to think, well, alien doomsday cult, that's a little bit wild. But it was fun to approach. And then of course, it takes place in West Virginia in a made-up town, but it's in an area that I have some family that lives around, and back when I did some schooling in that area as well. And so I tried to like take a lot of inspiration from the local area there, how it could have manifested, how it could have happened. Because something that's interesting about West Virginia, I think, is that there are all of these little places that if you don't know they're there, like you have no idea that they're there. Like you have to like know they're there to find it. So it's kind of built on this idea of, there are things in our neighborhoods, in our regions that we're not even aware of. And the funny thing was, I was visiting family last year, and we were kind of driving through the area that this book is kind of set in. And we're just driving, and my stepmom was like, oh, well, there's a cult right there. Just right off the road.
Just right.
And I was like, what? And she's like, well, we can slow down, but we can't stop. But she's like, those buildings there. She's like, it's a commune of people. They're living in there. She's like, and she started talking about them. It sounded exactly like the people that I came up with in my book. So.
Oh my God. Maybe you like already knew about them. There was like something like hidden in there.
So, I mean, like it's like based on, I mean, it could happen. They could be, a group like this could exist out there. So.
Well, they do exist. So let's be like, they do exist. They have exist, like the Mennonites, and then Haley's like, what was that group that did like the Haley's Common? And then they all did the Suicide Pact or whatever. Like, I mean, it's legitimately for real.
But they're in areas that you don't even expect too. You're just, And so and I love writing about locations where the setting actually feels like it's, it's even a character in the story. And I love writing about wooded locations. There's just something eerie and creepy about, the forest and, what goes on between the trees that you can't even see. And so there's a lot of that in this book as well.
I love that. And I totally agree with you. I think forest settings are some of my favorite like outdoor setting location because so I grew up in Arizona where you go on a hike and you climb up a mesa and you can just see for miles, like all you can just see everything. And then when I moved to Washington and I was like, I literally can't see past like 5 feet into the woods. Like that's nuts. So my friends heard this a ton of times where I was like, there's just like dead bodies all up on the side of the road. Like they could just be there because you don't even see them. So like I just think that there's so much that can be done with it. It's so spooky and so much we don't know about the woods.
And that was the other reason I put it in West Virginia as well, is because with the mining system in West Virginia, there are a lot of things out in the woods that, 100 years ago, before when they cut down the trees because they were building mines, there were areas that you just didn't walk in. You knew to be safe, you knew not to go there. But now with all the trees, you don't even know what you're walking on top of. And so that becomes part of the story as well, as like, people in the area not knowing the area well, not watching where they're walking. And there's more dangers than just the people around you. Although I would think that maybe the people around her are more dangerous than the woods.
Probably pretty scary.
Yeah.
Okay, so for this book, what was the most fun part for you to write? Did you was it making a cult?
I loved, it's hard. I think what I liked about this book a lot is, so there's one main protagonist. Zora is the main protagonist of the book, but we do get to see some point of view scenes from other survivors. So there were other survivors. She wasn't the only one who kind of escaped this cult and got out of it. And so we get to see some chapters from their point of view, either in the near present or from back when they were younger and they were all living on this commune together. And that, I think, for me was the most fun part, was kind of getting to see, we have, 5 or 6 different people who all survived a tragic event. When they were young, when they were teenagers, and how do they each look back on it? Because they all look back on it a little bit differently. Some of them kind of were just like, I'm cutting this off completely. I am starting a completely new life. I'm not even going to think about this. And some of them had closer ties to the faith and felt like they, couldn't move on without, the group, without that ideology, without this belief that the aliens would eventually come and allow them to fulfill their destiny, because these survivors believe that they are part of a, they're going to rebuild the human race, essentially. It's like, is their belief. And so some of them have retained that.
Very familiar to a certain cult I know about.
So some of them, they still are clinging to that, and some of them are trying to move on. So it was really fun to go back and forth and write their chapters from these different points of view. One of them went on to become quite famous and actually wrote a book about the event, and the other characters didn't like that, what she wrote about them, and claimed that, she had lied for publicity and things like that. So there's a lot of different personalities, and we get to see a little bit of their stories, each tragic in their own way, and that was fun. And then the opening scene, I think the opening page was really, the opening 2 pages was really fun to write, because that's the event, essentially.
Oh, the thing that's happening, the special thing. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so you were writing, you had those different characters. I know that we've talked about this before. I know you're big into outlining. Talk to me a little bit about that character development piece that you're doing as you're writing. Like, do you do it before? Do you do it during? Do you do it like you've done a draft and now you go back and you're filling in the things? Like, where is that development happening? Because the story sounds to me like it's character driven.
It is, yes. It's definitely, it's not like, I think a lot of my books in the past have been really plot driven. I think you have that a lot with thrillers, because there's a certain mechanism to writing thrillers.
You're trying to
This one is definitely more because we don't know exactly where the characters are going to end up at the end of the day, and so we're really relying on them to move things forward. For me, it was, it started with the one character. I knew that she was going to be the main voice for the story. She was the one that the reader was going to be really close to. And so when I started like expanding out to other characters, it was kind of like, okay, how do I separate them from her? So I knew this is the person that she is. She is somebody who survived this event, but she has a lot of trauma about what happened. She lost some family members in this event. She's trying to go through therapy, but she's really struggling with her memories of the event and she's trying to, make a life for herself in the normal world, so to speak. She's not succeeding very well. But she also doesn't really want to go back to it, but part of her kind of never left. So I was like, if that's the main starting point, then the other characters have to be different. How do we make them different? So I'm like, well, okay, I know I wanted somebody that became famous from the event, who wasn't afraid to talk about it. And so I knew that this person had to be bolder. She had to be more kind of in your face. She had to be not afraid to be on camera kind of a person. And then I knew I wanted to have somebody that was still completely dedicated to the faith. I knew I wanted to have somebody who really moved on, but in a way that they had, stayed kind of under the radar. Like, I'm moving away. I'm starting fresh. I'm not telling anybody who I was. Nobody's going to know. And so that's how I started fleshing out the characters. It was basically like, if this is my starting point and I have to have all these conflicting points, against her in order to make the story dynamic and to make things move forward. It was like, how do I make them separate from her but also with their own identity?
Yeah, absolutely. And so do you do that kind of work up front, or do you do the work as you're writing? Like you're saying, okay, so you have the character, you knew you needed to have the public facing character. Did you develop that person like before you started writing the words on the page, or did you do it like you started writing the words on the page, they developed, and then you're like, okay, let me like find out more about this person?
It was kind of a mix. So I knew ahead of time, for example, I knew I wanted that the famous character, for example, I knew I wanted it to be a female character. I knew I wanted her to be the opposite of the protagonist in personality, in the sense that she's outgoing, she's not afraid to like confront people. And so I knew that ahead of time. I didn't know, and I knew that she specifically had a relationship with a certain other character in the story. So each character in the story has a very strong relationship to another character in the story, which is part of the story. Why are they so connected to one person over another? Yeah. And so I knew that she had to be connected to another person. And so it was like, how do I build these connections into the character? And so once I knew her connection to the other character, once I knew that she was bold and a little combative and okay with fame, then I just kind of started writing, and I was like, okay, well, what would a person like this say? And so when in this situation, and so I kind of just experimented with her particular chapter, and I said, well, okay, let's make her chapter a chapter from her book. She's written a book about this event. Let's just write her chapter in her voice. And so you do get that throughout the book. You get to see chapters from her book in her voice. And that's how it really helped me kind of build the character. And then I tried to do that with each person. I was like, okay, so this person, what's something significant that happened to them in their story? And we just focus on that event and use that event to help build that character's voice.
Yeah, that's amazing. Okay. For you, what do you want? What are you hoping people walk away from this book feeling?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think for this book, I think because of the way that I wrote it and kind of what I was going through at the time that I wrote this, I think what's important is that the reader kind of walks away recognizing that each person's own internal story is not the same as other people around them. Even if you are living through the exact same event, even if you are experiencing the same thing with the same people around you, everybody is seeing that from a completely different perspective and a completely different, background in history. And they're going to take that forward in life in different directions, which was something kind of I was learning about at the time that I was writing this book, that I experienced some things in my life that like people that had been with me when that happened were like, that's not how I remember it. Like it wasn't a big deal to me. And I'm like, how could you not remember that? And that's the same thing here. So I think I would like it if the readers kind of walked away with like, like, oh, like, wow, yeah, you it is possible to, grow up with somebody and have a completely different experience or a completely different relationship to
Yes.
the same people in your lives.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? That's like that. Even with my own brother, sometimes he'll be like, "Do you remember this thing?"
Yeah.
No, I have no idea. Or I'll say something and he'd be like, "No, that's wait, I have no idea what you're talking about." Like he, so funny story. When after my mom passed, we were like going through stuff and we were talking about something, and he was like, "Oh yeah, that one time that you drowned," and I was like, "Oh, well, I remember drowning." But apparently I've drowned like 3 times and I only remember 1. He was like, "No, it was very like I
Wow.
very much remember this." And I was like, "Well, I don't."
Yeah.
So
Well, it's interesting because I think at the time that I was coming up with this idea and I was doing my like, TikTok binge of like cults and things, I came across there was like a
yeah.
psychologist that I came across on TikTok, and he was talking about this, about how, siblings in a family, even though they grow up together and even though they live in the same house and they have the same parents and maybe they go to the same school, they can have completely different experiences on all of those things. And I
Yeah.
remember that was at the
It's
forefront of
bananas.
my mind when I was coming up with these characters and coming up with the tragedy they all go through, because they all go through the same tragedy. They've all grown up in the same
Mhm.
location with surrounded by the same people. They're taught the same, foundational knowledge and religion, and they're not getting any outside influence, and yet it still ends up different for all of them.
Yeah. Wow, that's I know, isn't it? It's so fascinating. Just the human
Mhm.
experience in general, I just find really fascinating. And obviously that's why we
Yes,
read and why we write
exactly.
because we want to see all of those different things. Um, okay, so you've also written in several genres. So you've written in the police procedural, Nordic noir, you've written in the psychological suspense, and psychological thriller, and then you've got now this book, and then in the fall, Ravenous will be released, and that's
Yes.
horror. So tell me, like, first of all, why do you write the dark and twisted? Like, what drew you to these genres, and what keeps you here? And what's it like switching genres every like couple? I mean, you've had, like, a couple
Yeah.
books that you'll do, like,
Well,
spin together, and then we're getting something different.
the switching genres was not intentional exactly, for people who
Mhm.
aren't in publishing and maybe don't know, is, sometimes you start in something, and unfortunately if your sales aren't they need to be, your publisher kind of can't continue it. And so that happened with my first 2 books. They did
Mhm.
okay. They didn't do great. And so after the second one, they said, would you be willing to try something different? And it was, my second book came out at the height of the pandemic, and I was already stressed out, and I was already feeling kind of like I wanted a fresh start. And so I was like, sure, I'll try psychological thrillers. And it was a great
Mhm.
writing experience for me because I learned, oh, I can actually write in first person, which was something I thought I would never be able to do. Um, I
Oh,
really
wow.
I have always kind of detested first person present tense because I feel like you have to have a very
Mm.
strong voice. You have to be very good at it to hold the reader's attention. And I just thought, well, you know what? That works really well with psychological thrillers. And so with Sweet Little Lies, I thought, well, I'll just try it. It's either going to work or it's not going to work, and we'll just see what happens. And with that
Yeah.
book, I learned a lot about myself as a writer, because I was like, oh, I can actually do this if I try. And it was actually
Mhm.
quite fun. I really enjoyed writing that book. Um, as for like the dark and twisted, like getting into that, I don't. I mean, well, we've known each other for a while. Like I've been through a lot.
Yeah.
Life is a
Yeah.
little dark and twisted. I
Life is dark and twisted. I find, like, the more fucked up your life is, the more you like
Yeah.
the dark and
And I
twisted
think
shit.
there's something, I don't know, maybe there is something kind of like emotionally healing about getting it out of my thoughts and onto the page and turning it into a story. My stories aren't exactly known for having happy endings, although I think some of them are
Yeah.
kind of, maybe could be, they're kind, some of them are kind,
They're kind of.
some of them are like they end on
They're
downer.
thrillers, though, like, they're crime fiction.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily
Yeah.
supposed to have we're not talking
Yeah.
romance here,
But actually,
so
my first 2 books, like my first book, I was in a creative writing master's program when I started writing that book. And I was actually writing Westerns in that program. my final thesis for that book, for that program, for my master's program, was supposed to be a Western. And right before my last semester, somebody close to me passed away, like very suddenly. And it really affected me. And I couldn't write those Westerns anymore because they were kind of like a sardonic. They were kind of like they were kind of funny.
Yeah.
And
And you're like, I'm not
I'm not
here.
feeling
I'm
funny
not
right
in the
now.
funny.
Yeah. And so I ended up writing Where Ravens Roost, like in that semester, as my master's thesis. And so that's kind of how I got into it. As for going into horror now, horror was the genre I always thought as a kid that I would write in. That was kind of the dream. And I just, after writing my fourth book, I just felt like, I just feel like I want to. I'm seeing finally people are getting back into horror. It's having like a revival. It's having a resurgence. And there were so many people that were like bringing it back in ways that like I had never thought of before. And I just thought, oh, it's so exciting right now. I just want to go and try my hand at it. And so I had a long weekend. I basically made a writing retreat for myself over a 4-day weekend. And I was like, I'll just start writing and we'll see what happens by the end of the weekend. And in that weekend, I wrote like 16 or 17,000 words, and it became the first act of Ravenous. Yeah.
Wow. That was a sign. If the words are coming that like easily,
and I've never had that before.
Also so jealous, but that's amazing.
On any of my writing, I've never just like in a weekend knocked out so many words without really plotting.
Yeah.
Because I am known for plotting because it's the only way I can stick to my deadlines.
Yeah.
But that one just kind of came to me, and I was just like, this felt like the story that I needed to tell at that moment. And then I got lucky that my publisher they were looking for horror books. They wanted something like that as well, and they liked it. And I'm very excited about it. It's different. Yeah. It's definitely a departure from my thrillers. I can't even say if you like this thriller of mine, you'll like this book because it's way out there. It's way out there. Yeah. But
that's amazing. But that's also why you're using a second name. You're using a pen name and going into horror with Dax Dagger. And under that name.
I mean,
right?
part of it, yeah.
So that your readers also don't get confused.
That too. But also, I mean, when you have 2 books out in 1 year that aren't in the same series, you run the risk of competing against yourself if they're coming out in the same name, because then readers might be like, oh, do I have to choose between one or the other? And if you're writing a series of books like my first 2, they both came out in the same year, but it was fine because, readers of series, they will buy books as quickly as you can write them.
Yes, they'll keep buying.
But I just felt like, new genre, new name. I don't have to worry about it like, infringing on Home Sweet Home. They can stand apart. I can find some new readers who are interested in Ravenous, and my old readers can still have this one. So
that's amazing. I'm very excited. So one of the things I wanted to ask you about, so you have 2 master's degrees in literature stuff and writing, and like, oh my gosh. So if you could teach a new writer one thing, what would it be? And can you teach it to me right now?
Oh, yes. Oh, we're just going to jump right into our writing thing here. Let's, the thing that I would say is, and this comes from screenwriting, and it has always worked for me. And I will say that it's made my first drafts much cleaner, is this technique of like in late, out early. And you see this in film and TV all the time. And basically the idea is that when you start your scene, so when you're starting your new chapter, you start it as late into the scene as possible, and then you get out as quickly as possible. So by getting into the scene late, you don't have to worry about writing too much build up or like, setting the stage. You just like throw your character in as close to whatever the main event or the main purpose of the scene is. And then as soon as they have gotten the knowledge that they need, the character has learned what they need to learn or has, fought the bad guy that they need to fight, you just get them out. So you don't run the risk of like lingering too long in a scene. I think that makes a big difference between, beginner writers who really like to kind of build things up because you're still learning it yourself, and writers who are like, who have been writing for a long time and are, on deadlines where you don't have time to like linger,
Yeah. Well, I think that's also a really great, and that probably helps you with your pacing. So one of the things you do really well is you have really well-paced books. And is that like one of the keys, or can you talk a little bit about how you determine the pacing of your story as an overarching structure and then within each
Yeah, I
scene?
think, and it's funny because I didn't even realize how good I was at pacing. Oh, it sounds like I'm so good at it. No.
You're like, I'm so good at
But I had
it. Sometimes you have to have other people tell you
another
this is
author
true.
reached out to me and he said to me, he's like, I read all of your books, and he's like, you do this thing. He's like, you do this thing, and it's a pacing thing, and that's how you move through it. And I didn't even realize I was doing it, but now every time I do it, I think of him because I'm like, he's completely
Yeah.
right. So yeah, I think first you have to know, first of all, if you are a plotter, it's a little bit easier because if you follow story beats, then you write out what your main story beats are, and then the first thing you need to know is, what is your word count? What is your goal? If you're writing a psychological thriller, you really want it to try and stay around 90,000 words. You don't really want to go too far over that. And so if you know that 90,000 words is your goal, and you know that your midpoint has to fall at 45,000 words, then you can very easily, with some math with the calculator, figure out how long your chapters have to be in order to get where you're going to go. And so if you know you can only spend 1,000 words on a chapter to get to an event, then you know that you can't spend too much time at the beginning of the chapter. And then you just have to make sure as well that when you're plotting out your beats, or even if you're not plotting, when you come to the next chapter you're going to write, if you know what the event is going to be, every scene has to be important to the story. Every scene has to be essential to the story. So knowing what that essential thing is before you start your chapter, so you can get to that essential thing as quickly as possible and then move on.
Yeah.
It's a good trick, and that's also how you can end on cliffhanger endings. And if you're writing thrillers, cliffhanger endings are, I would say, essential
Key.
for each chapter.
Yeah.
It really is.
It really is, because that's gets the
Yeah.
page turning. And if you don't have that, right, like, and I think that there's like some beats that lead to you to having like a closing of like the situation, but there still should be something that's in there that causes the propulsion to the next page, even if it's like, okay, we've closed the loop on this clue, right? But what else happened? What was the question that happened out of that? Now what that's get you going to the next thing. So it doesn't always, like, cliffhangers, I think, like, they can work and they are like propulsive, but if your story creates, like, you've answered the question, it's still, you still have to have another question at minimum to keep going, right?
100%. Yeah. And I think sometimes like newer writers, they really struggle with how do I bridge then going from the one cliffhanger to the other without feeling like I'm just like throwing event after event after event at the reader. And something that I do, and this is what the other author had pointed out to me, he's like, every time the tension gets really, really high on one of your scenes, he's like, you do a time cut. Like you do a flashback.
Ooh.
Or you do a point of view shift. So you can, like, shift your time. So like if you wanted to, like, we're something is happening, your main character is about to discover something, or has just discovered something that's changing the course of her, her belief on whatever is going on in her life. Cut to what happened 15 years ago. Something that relates to it, that gives the reader a little bit more information, but still builds on the shock of what they had in the last chapter, but also makes them want to keep reading to get to the next chapter, to get back to the present. So yeah, for me, like, the little tricks of the trade is either shifting time, which I do a lot in Home Sweet Home, or shifting POV. And a writer who does that very well is Lucy Foley, especially in her first two books. Those two, she does a really good job of, like, building up the tension individually in each scene, and then shifting points of view. Another author who does something similar is MJ Arledge. He writes crime police procedurals, and his books always have, like, a sort of ticking clock in the background. And that ticking clock, if you can keep, like, sprinkling that into each chapter, like a reminder that if something isn't done by a certain time, there's going to be consequences.
we only have 12 hours
Yeah.
until she dies, 10 hours until
Yeah.
she dies, like,
Yeah,
cut
exactly, like the
24,
24
right? Like
technique,
that.
yeah. You know,
Yeah.
or if you're watching The Pit does this pacing amazing on HBO.
Okay.
If you're watching that show, I mean, they are doing pacing and I would say character development very well for
Mm.
a multi-cast, like a huge cast of characters at the same time. And I
Yeah.
think that can very easily be translated into writing fiction. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I will say, sometimes it's just faster to do a little study of a
Yeah,
TV
it
show
is. Well,
or
it is.
a
Yeah.
movie than it is to do. But I mean, like, I still think we
Yeah.
should study like the art, but I think seeing it in other forms can help like change the way you think about things. Like, I mean, this is totally like off topic, but the other day, I was watching a horror movie, one of my favorite horror movies, and I was watching it thinking about the villain's point of view the
Okay.
whole time. So like when they're on the screen, okay, what could they possibly be thinking, and like how they're acting, knowing that they are the killer, and then going like then seeing other scenes, and like if the final girl is being interviewed by the police, what is the killer doing during that time, right? So just like sometimes even thinking about things like that can help you to shift the way you are looking at your own
Yeah.
work, because it's helping you think about villain logic, or like what's going on elsewhere in the story that you don't need to know, or maybe you do need to know, but like how are you going to get that information out? And yeah, it just was like it was a really interesting thing, because I've done some studying of novels recently for some of my workshops that I'm working on, but the like studying in film and how they like are quickly changing things, or how they're using time manipulation, like you were saying, that kind of stuff. It's really fascinating to see then how you can apply that to art, to your writing, and it's just a little bit of a faster
Yeah.
way to get
And of
there.
course with film and TV, I mean, you have to get there faster because you're only going to be able to keep your audience like, staring at a screen for so long. And so yeah, it's
Mhm.
extra important there. And that's why I think that's why MJ Arledge is so good at writing fiction. It's because he comes from screenwriting. He comes from that. And you can actually feel
Ooh,
that
okay.
in his chapters. They feel like, oh, and here comes the commercial break, if there was one, or here comes the big scene
Yeah.
cut. And so, yeah, I think definitely it's a good way of kind of, helping you to see it from a different perspective. But yeah, that's also the great benefit if you have a story where you have two different points of view, for example, especially if they're two contrasting points of view, if you have the protagonist and the villain, like a sort of Mr. Mercedes type situation where you're going from
Yeah.
one to the other. You can build up the tension in one, come close to giving the reader the answer, maybe holding back a little bit, and then suddenly we're jumping to the next
Mhm.
person and they're going to be so, they need to know what happened in the last scene. They're going to just be racing through the next chapter, which is also something you might have to keep in
Yep.
mind if they're going to race through that chapter to get back to the other one.
Like, yeah, so then how much are you
Yeah.
putting into the mid chapter
Yeah.
as you're creating that break? But I do think it's interesting. Like, I definitely have read books where I'm in the chapter and it's so close, and then I'm like, what? We changed point of views, and then I skip to the next. Like, I'll just skip over and go back, and then I'll go back and read
I
the
think,
thing, because I'm just like, I just
and I
need
feel like
the answer.
if you are writing a story where you know that is going to happen, then make the next
Mhm.
chapter a little bit shorter. If maybe
Yeah, just make it shorter.
if your protagonist is the hero, give the villain shorter chapters. Varying your chapter
Mhm.
lengths, varying your sentence lengths. If you're getting down to like a line editing level of like your pacing, I mean,
Yeah.
all of that can help move the reader through. And then of course, if you hit a point where you feel like everything is moving too fast, which I think happens a lot in like the third
Mhm.
acts of books because things start
Yeah.
tumbling down.
Because you're like trying to
Yeah.
get through, gotta get all the explanations, all the things, the action, everything's got to happen. And at that point, we're not doing a whole hell of a lot of character
No.
development,
So then it's
right? It's
almost
like
like
you're
you have to
looking
like
more
slow
action
things down
resolution.
sometimes. And slowing things down, like for me, is not a
Yeah.
problem because I will like write way too much exposition. But I mean, that's what you can do if you need to slow something down. Yeah. But I do believe
Mhm.
like every
Yeah.
single chapter, every single scene has to have something important, whether it's, you know, something that the character learns or whether we are like setting up some kind of obstacle. every single chapter has to have that. And if it doesn't have something like that, it's not serving your story. And then just cut it. And cutting it will also help your pacing.
Yeah, it'll help you move faster. Yeah. Well, I think that's really, really fantastic advice. And I would definitely recommend that people check out your books because as like great examples, there's just every book you've written. I'm not just saying that because you're my friend. Like I really do genuinely love them.
They are too long,
like,
though. They are too long. So I need to work on some of my pacing.
I don't know. I mean, I don't agree with that, but okay.
I think my first introduction to editing on my first book was hilarious because my first book when I submitted it, I think it was like at 115,000 words, which for a first thriller is too long.
Yeah, that's way,
and so
way,
they're
way
like
too long.
They're
you
like
are correct.
My editor went through and she cut like 20,000 words, which was great. But then she asked me to add stuff. And then the book ended up being 120,000 words when it went to print. So it actually ended up being longer.
At that point, though, if that's like your editor's guiding you, you're fine. You've already made it into the
I feel like it works, though.
But don't query an agent or send to a publisher like 120,000 word thriller. No. At this point in time, in this age of publishing, you got to be a lot shorter than that.
If I were starting now, if this were going to be my first book and I was going to go out in the querying trenches for a thriller, I would not push 90,000 words. I would stick to 90, or 80 to 90 is the safe zone.
80 to 85, like that's where I feel is really the sweet spot because I mean, especially debuts. I think you can get away with it a little bit more when you are Liz Moore and you have like an established, thing and you can write God of the Woods being like hugely thick.
I mean, even I've heard some people even saying that for fantasy, which is, the chunky genre, they're even saying like try not to push 100,000 words or 120,000 words on your first one. So
it's because and when you get the series going or when you get like a following, that's different. But their debuts, and also the cost of printing is a whole thing. And then we have a whole situation. There was I don't know if you know about something in the publishing industry, but like I think a distributor went under. And so there's a major impact into books actually getting printed and being in stores. And these are it's impacting Big Five, like
I believe
books and stuff. So it's a crazy time out there. So make your life easier by trying to stay on the lower side of the genre expectations. And then if they want you to expand, then you can expand.
You can always add more,
Yeah. There's always, there's so much more you can
darlings.
Do.
Save them for the next book.
Okay, so we're gonna go into the next section, which I lovingly like to call slow fire questions.
Okay. Slow fire questions. Here we go.
Yeah, these are the questions that I ask every author because I always find it so fascinating to see how every author has a different answer to the same thing. So first off, what is on your desk, particularly when you're writing?
Oh, when I'm writing. Oh, okay. Well, I'm going to share first my you can't really see the words because the lighting is bad, but this is the positive potato, and it basically says, "I may be a tiny potato, but I believe in you. Go do your thing." So he sits here and he stares at me. So I always get that.
Love it.
I also usually I have a cat on my desk, like an actual cat, but I had to lock him out so that he wouldn't walk in front of the screen for this discussion.
He was like, "No, excuse me, this is my world."
When he's not here, I have my little lucky cat. And I usually have I always have a Yankee candle because for each of my books I get a new candle, and then that's the scent of the book for me.
Oh, okay. Whoa. Because this goes into my next question, which is like, what's a ritual you have before or after you write? Tell me about this candle thing. I'm so excited.
I have a focus problem. I really struggle to focus, even when I really want to write. And because I'm on a digital first publisher, my deadlines are much tighter than a lot of like normal authors. Mm-hmm. I don't get a year to write my books. 6 months is usually what my contract says for my books. So I have to stay focused every day that I'm actually writing. Otherwise I will never I will never hit my deadlines. And something I learned about myself is that I'm very kind of scent oriented. And so I light a candle. As long as the candle is burning, I am writing, I am working. And then it kind of like, I don't know, I Pavlov dog myself into thinking, oh, I smell the smell. It's work time. It's writing time. It feels like I should be doing it. And so I got into this like kind of ritual of picking a different candle for each book. So by the time the book is
oh my gosh,
done,
okay, so what were the candles? What were your candle scents
so
for your books?
this was Home Sweet Home. It's like halfway through, because I actually wrote that one quite quickly. So this was Sparkling Cinnamon, was that one, and Ravenous, which comes out in October, and I was actually writing it around October when I started. Is what is this? Pumpkin Harvest.
Ooh, okay, both excellent choices.
Yeah, and I think for my first two books, it was something foresty. It was a foresty scent.
Okay,
I have them somewhere. I've saved them all.
That's so amazing. I'm obsessed with this idea. And I told like because the whole idea of a ritual before or after you're writing is exactly what you're saying. It's creating that almost Pavlovian response where you're just like, okay, this means that I'm writing now. So I totally agree, and so I always find that really fascinating. But that's I love it, because I like get a new notebook for the books, right? So each one has like its own,
I like that too.
special color. But
I have notebooks for editing.
I'm like kind of obsessed.
So when I do my editing, like I like to go straight through as much as possible. And if I get to a point where I notice something where I think it might be a problem, then I just write it on the notebook next to me. I don't write it in the actual draft, and then I go back and I just kind of check mark off the editing notebook. That's it. And the only other thing I really ever have on the desk is I usually have one or two books that are kind of currently inspiring the current work in progress. And so that's also what I have on the desk.
I love that. It's all just like gets you into the right mindset.
Because I think sometimes I get into a place where I'm like, you know what? I feel like my words aren't wording. And then I just pick up a book that I feel like inspires what I want to write. And I read one page and it's like, oh, I remember how to write again.
Okay. Yeah. I love that idea. And I'm going to steal that as well. I'm like determined this year I'm finishing this like freaking book. And so I'm just going to get a bunch of all the things. I'm taking everyone's rituals.
Well, and the writing sprints, which I do everything that way now. I do all, even if I'm by myself, I writing sprint everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's like you're doing what, 15, 20 minutes?
Yeah, I do 20 minutes at a time. That's like my sweet spot I've discovered is 20 minutes. And if I stay focused and the candle is going and the timer is going, then I can do my daily word count in less than 2 hours. So, and then I just
amazing.
Watch TV for the rest of the day.
No, you do other stuff. You cosplay and you ride horses.
I'm doing, like crazy dances on TikTok and
You're doing crazy dances on TikTok. You're busy. You're busy. Okay, so if you are writing multi-POV or multiple timeline, do you write straight through like a reader would read it, or do you write each section?
Oh,
so I'm kind of thinking about your character. You were just talking about the book that they wrote. Did you write like their stuff out and then they put the chapters in, or did you write their book chapters as you were writing?
I like to write if I can. This didn't work on one of my books, but if I can, I prefer to write chronologically from the start of the book through the end, like the reader reads it, because that helps me find places where the pacing isn't working or where something doesn't make sense. So all of the chapters in Home Sweet Home, with the exception of the ones I did during the editing process, because I added some new chapters in later, including one written by her, I wrote them all as I came to them. But I had an outline that said, first chapter, this is what happened, second chapter here, and I knew that her book chapter fell in chapter 8 or something. So I knew that's where it was going to come in. Yeah. And for me, I like that because it helps me, like, I don't get bored then. Because if I stayed in the one character's voice the entire time and I read only her thing straight through, I feel like I would lose the tension and the excitement of jumping to somebody else and then be like, "Ooh, yeah, I get to do this guy's his chapter, and then I'm going to jump back to her. I find that exciting. That's
Yeah.
where I add the
Yeah.
whimsy.
I know, I do too. It does, it's like, and it does make it more fun. I always struggle with, because for me, it's, it's changing voice if I'm changing multi-POV. Like, okay, so now I'm in this other person's head. And so that can sometimes like slow down. Do you find that when you're changing, like you're in Zora's head and then you're in your secondary character's head and then you're back in Zora and then you're back in another character? Like, does that switch, is that easy for you to do, or is that more of a challenge? You have to like, okay, so now I'm in, you know, Blake's I have no idea, but Blake's chapter, and he's doing this thing. Like, is it difficult for your brain to make that
So
switch?
I think if I really like the characters, I don't find it difficult. If I love the characters,
Okay.
and with Home Sweet Home, I loved all of these characters. Even my villain character, who I hate. I think he is my worst villain. I think he is a horrible person.
Okay. Well, I'm really excited to read him now.
But I felt like they were so interesting to me and they were so alive to me that it was quite easy to jump from one to the other, and I found myself quite excited to go to the one to the other. In contrast to that, writing The Man in Room 7, which was also a multi-point of view for me, that one I found much harder. And part of the problem with that one was I wrote the entire book and it was only 50,000 words. And I had to go back and add in completely new characters and completely new story, like secondary storyline, in order to make the book long enough. I'd never run into that problem before. I'm usually a very big overwriter. And so in that book, it was a lot harder because there was a character, well, there were two characters I really loved writing. And then there was one character that for me was a bit of a struggle. And so whenever I got to the struggle character's point of view, I really was kind of, it did go a little bit slower. So something I learned from that book was that if you're going to do multi-point of view, you need to have something about each character that you're really excited about, something you're really excited to explore, or something about their voice that you find really fun or engaging to write. Otherwise, those chapters will feel more difficult. Yeah.
Okay. I think that's a really fair assessment, and something for writers to consider. Because I think that completely makes sense. When I'm in the chapters where I'm like, ugh, this is so hard to do. Typically, I'm not as excited about the character, which is usually a sign, right? Like, oh, what's going on? But then if you're a newer writer, it's hard to know, is it a sign, or is it just that I don't know what I'm doing, or is it that this is just my process? Like, so it takes a little bit. If you're a newer writer,
the answer is probably you don't know what you're doing and you're still trying to explore the whole writing process in general. If you're one or two books in and you're having that problem, I think there's probably something with the character that's not working, or something that needs to be changed, or something about their perspective that's not working. Maybe their perspective is too close to the other character, or maybe their personality is too close. Actually, when I wrote The Man in Room 7, that was a problem. That was one of my editorial problems, is that a couple of the voices sounded too similar. And so what I ended up having to do, and this was kind of fun, so this could be a good trick for somebody. What I ended up having to do was going back and giving each character a catchphrase that they will say multiple times in the course of the book. And so that would be a clue to the reader that, like, oh, only she would say that because that's a weird thing to say, or only he says that. That's because it's such a bonkers thing to say. And so I gave each character a catchphrase, and that really helped kind of cement their personality. And since I learned that on my last book, going into Home Sweet Home, I knew that. So I took that information with it, and it made writing this one a lot easier.
Oh my gosh. That's such a smart idea. That really is such a smart idea. And even if they, like, you're only saying it a couple of times, the fact that you have this in your head of like, this is the thing that they say, that like that's very symptomatic of their
and it can be as simple as, this is the character that swears, this is the character that doesn't swear.
Yeah.
It can be that simple.
Right.
It can be that easy. Yeah.
So what is the most bullshit piece of advice you've ever heard?
Ooh, double-edged sword. I would say it's there's two.
Okay.
The one is write every day. I don't think you have to. And I think actually what I learned on my first two books was definitely don't, because I burned out so hard writing every day. And honestly, writing every day does not mean that you're productive every day. And I think taking off a few days can be really good for your creativity and really good for your writing, to step away and then go back. The other writing advice that I'm not really keen on is the write what you know. I think that works if we're talking about emotions. I think write what you know emotionally, write what you know about relationships. But obviously, if you're going to write sci-fi and fantasy, we don't know about dragons and we don't know all these things about space and aliens and whatever. So, I mean, you know, obviously that's going to come from the made up part of your imagination. But, you know, when it comes to write what you know, I think only when it comes to terms of relationships and emotions, unless you're writing like a hardcore, like from the perspective of a very specific career where you have to know something, then I would say it's
if you're writing a legal thriller, you might want to know a little bit about
then get a law degree.
You might want to know some stuff. But even then you can research, right? Like that's what research is for. So and what's the best piece of advice you've gotten?
My favorite piece of advice is add an animal. I learned this from my creative writing professor at the university when I was getting my bachelor's degree. And he said he doesn't trust any story or any book that doesn't have an animal in it, because there are animals in the world all the time. Even if you're not recognizing them, you're going for a walk, you hear birds. You know,
there's something,
your dog shits on your lawn or something like that. You're always like running into animals, but people, especially people like young writers or beginning writers, they always forget about animals unless the animal is essential to the story. But adding animals to the story adds a level of realism to the story, you know. So all of my books, have at least one animal that pops up regularly to kind of remind the reader that we are in a real world where animals exist.
I love that. I really, really love that. What is the darkest idea you've had that scared you about yourself?
Ooh. Without giving away too much of what happens in Home Sweet Home, there is something that happens in this book. It happens off screen, so to speak, but it is definitely, I think, the darkest thing that I've ever put to pen to page, so to speak. And it's definitely like, you know, it involves an aspect of manipulation and narcissism, you know, because we're dealing with, you know, a cult. Cults have to have a leader. There has to be somebody that everybody's following. And, you know, I think it's this moment when somebody comes to the realization that maybe the things that they are doing in service to this one person is not good. It's not good.
Okay. Well, I'm glad this makes me even more excited.
It's hard to explain without giving away, but basically, you know, there's something that happens behind the scenes that the main characters don't recognize because they're children at the time that it's going on. But there is an adult character who at some point in the book has a realization of what is actually going on and what they've actually brought their own children into by joining this group. It's that fear of, what have I brought my child into, and how do I get out of it before something happens to me or my child situation. So it's a danger level. And then, of course, being surrounded by people who trust the leader so fervently.
And all of a sudden you're the one that's like, wait, hold on.
So I think that is the darkest thing I've ever kind of come up with.
Well, now I'm even more excited because your books are pretty freaking dark.
You know, they are really dark.
I'm very
And the
excited.
funny thing is I think
they are.
I think my horror is probably the least dark of my books. I mean, it's gruesome. There's like some gore. There are like monsters. There are some scary thematic things. But, you know, the thrillers come from like a place of real life. And I think real life, there's nothing scarier than real life.
It's so much scarier. So personally, one of the reasons I'm not the biggest fan of supernatural horror, like in movies or in books and stuff, it's fine. Like, it's fine. I like it, but it's not my, like, really what scares me is because I think people are so freaking scary. the things that people do in real life. Like if you read enough true crime or spend enough time around true crime, like what people do is
and
way
when I
scarier.
was, researching the events in Home Sweet Home, like there's nothing in this book that hasn't happened somewhere in the world, and that scares me. That's
And that's
scary.
crazy.
Yeah.
That's so scary. Yeah. How many drafts do you do before you share with anybody?
Oh, people are gonna hate this answer. 1.
I know it. I knew you were gonna say that. You write so clean. It's stupid. But I know you've had tons of practice. But God,
it's hard.
It's
As well. I feel like I need to turn a light on because it's getting dark here. Yeah, I think, and this comes from having such tight deadlines. I really don't have time to send it to anybody but my editor. So like my first draft, I try to finish it. I try to finish it with 4 weeks before it's due. And then I spend that 4 weeks kind of reading through to make sure that like grammatically it makes sense and I haven't like changed Bob's name to Sue or something like that. The basics, but there's never time to do what I would call a real edit before it goes directly to my editor.
A developmental edit before you go out to your editor, because you'll get your letters back.
I mean, on my second book, which the first draft was a disaster, it was the biggest disaster of all time, and I ended up having to rewrite 250 pages of that book in 2 months.
Wow.
It literally, I finished it.
Yeah, I remember you telling me that it almost killed you. You were like, this book almost killed me.
And so when it was nominated for an award, like you could have knocked me over because I was like, well, I put a lot of work in that. No, but I mean, I finished it and then like at midnight and it was due. Like I just turned it in with an apology email. But that was the book that taught me I have to outline. I have to have a good idea from beginning to, if I'm on a 6-month deadline, I have to know from the beginning to the end exactly what's going to happen because there's no time to change my mind halfway through the story and go back and make a massive change. And so since that book, my books have been quite clean. Yeah. That is But I mean, I wish I had more time, but at the same time, I don't like lingering in a story for very long because I want to move on to the next thing. So it also works out for me because I want to turn it in and move on. So
it makes sense because you're doing 2 books a year. So
we're gonna try to do 3 the next time. We're gonna see. Oof. I don't know. Building up.
Oh man. Okay, so what part of the process is your favorite, and what part is your least favorite?
My least favorite is line edits. I hate line edits. I know a lot of people hate just the developmental edit. I actually really like the developmental edit. I like that phase. To me, it's kind of reassuring because somebody else has seen it and they're like, they've told me it's good enough. I just have to make these few changes to make it better. But I hate line edits. I hate like, oh, you've used this word 3 times in one paragraph. We have to figure out a different way to say this. That to me is just so the little tiny. I'm really bad at the tiny details. I'm really bad. Favorite, but I do like the developmental edit. I would say though my favorite is drafting the first 100 pages. The first 100 pages and the last 50 pages are my favorite part of the writing process.
They're so fun. It's like when everything is like you're building it, it's brand new, it's fresh, you're excited, and then you're at the conclusion.
But the middle, I hate the middle. I don't hate it.
And that's where everyone gets stuck at, and that's because it's the hardest part.
And I, sad to say, it hasn't gotten any easier for me really. I still find the middle to be the hardest part. But line edits.
I've heard that from multiple authors who have done 10, 15, 20, 30 books.
Because the middle is what everybody remembers. It's when everything happens.
It's when the big twists happen or the big thing or like the
But for me, the exciting part is,
oh my God,
for me, the exciting part is like introducing the character and introducing them to whatever it is that's going to start their journey. And then the big finish. I like that. So
yeah. It's everything else in the middle. It's like the bulk of the book.
Exactly.
So what is your old school favorite mystery or thriller?
Oh, it's so dark in my room. Can I even see it? Yeah. It's a tie. I think it's going to either, and they're both by the same author, so it's okay. It's either going to be The Snowman or The Redbreast by Ionesco from the Harry Hola series.
Okay.
I love that book series so much. And I read those books right before I wrote my first book. And I just,
oh my God, that makes so much sense too.
I feel like, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like that's the pinnacle of crime thriller for me, like that book series. Yeah. And to me, it's how fluid that he is able to come up with a new thriller idea for each book, and yet the through lines for the character relationships continue seamlessly. And I love that. I love that. And I feel like I'm almost reading them because I want to find out what happens with the relationships of the characters more than what happens in the.
Oh my God, I have a book series that's like that, where like each case at this point I'm just like, man, I just really want to see what happens to the characters. I want them to,
are they going to get together? Or is that his baby? Or like,
yeah, like whatever. Because it's like that's what happens in series, is because you get connected to the character. You get connected to the character, the single character, whatever. Well, Karin, it was so much fun spending time with you today. Where can people find you? Because I know that you can be found in several places.
For my thrillers, you can find me at Karin Nordin Author at Instagram and on TikTok. That sounded weird. But now I'm also at Dax Dagger on Instagram and TikTok for all of my horror stuff and my cosplay stuff. I'm slowly going to start sprinkling that in onto the Instagram. It's all on TikTok, so you can find it there. And I also have a YouTube that I promise I will update more as the year goes on.
You also have a podcast.
Oh, I do have a podcast,
right? Yeah. You do. I do have a podcast.
I forget sometimes.
You are everywhere. You are.
I have a podcast with a couple friends of mine, but it's a nerdy podcast. So occasionally we talk about books, we talk about movies, TV shows, a lot of Star Trek, that kind of thing. And it is called Another Frackin' Podcast. It is a Battlestar Galactica joke.
Another Frackin' Podcast.
So we talk about a lot of nerdy things, but we at the moment are only doing like one a month. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's fun. Well, friends, if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on Instagram at Sabrina Thatcher Author. And if you want more information about my book coaching services, you can find that at crimeandquill.com. Until next time, friends, stay sharp and right twisted.